Okay, so we're talking about manipulating CSS using JavaScript. So does that make sense? You guys know what that actually even means?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so this is if you want to do some actually more complicated style stuff on your website to actually have it be dynamic so you can change things on your website. You can use JavaScript to trigger those types of things. So let me show you a website that I made that you actually illustrates this. So I've got these 3 different little colored boxes, obviously red, green, and blue. I've got buttons for each one of the boxes individually, and then a button that will change all 3 of them together. So when I click change red, it just cycles through some different shades of red. Same thing with green, randomly just cycling through some different ones. If I click change all, same thing, but it does them all randomized. So how this is working, here we go, is obviously I have my CSS set pre ahead of time. I set default CSS style rules so that I actually have the colors in the boxes when I first start. I don't have to do that technically. I could use JavaScript to set the whole CSS style sheet up essentially. But basically everything is happening down here. It's really pretty simple. It's right here. This one line is doing pretty much everything. You can see that it says color object dot style dot background color. Now color object is just the name of the element, the object that I actually pulled out of the DOM. So to kind of give you an example on how I set this up, I have a couple of arrays up here that have some different color values, some different hex color values in there. And all it's doing later in the function is it's calling a randomize function that's just grabbing a random index in the array. That's how I'm randomizing the colors. Anyways, I've got the event listeners for the different buttons that I have on the screen, because remember I had the a change red, change green, change blue button, and then a change all button. Those are those. I'm grabbing those out of the DOM and I'm storing them into a JavaScript object here. And then I'm creating event listers for each one of these, and I'm calling the change function down here. So I just was giving you a little background on what was going on here. Now we go down to the change document. All that's happening there is I'm basically storing whatever, based on whatever color I pass in as an argument. If I pass, because you'll notice up here, right here in the all button, for example, you can see I'm calling the change function and I'm passing in a string with the color that I'm going to be manipulating. And here I'm just grabbing the right array for that particular color, and I'm grabbing the right div for that color. Anyhow, like I said, everything is really happening down here. I'm grabbing the color object that's being set here, so whether it's red, green, or blue. And then it's just, the reason why I set it up this way, by the way, so that I could type less code, it's just a little bit more compact and everything. But right here, style property right here, that's the most important thing, because that's what allows you to actually access the CSS rules on the currently loaded CSS style sheet. Did you have a question?
Yeah, that's why to see how the style is.
Like to say what again? Well, it's like how it's. I'll show you. I'll show you in a second. So, for every CSS property that you're familiar with, there is another property inside style that relates to that thing. Now, it's standard syntax in JavaScript that you use camel casing for separate words. So in CSS, you'd be using hyphens a lot of time to separate words. Most of the time, all you have to do is just remove the hyphen and then camel case the second word to figure out whatever property that would be. If you ever are trying to figure out a property and you're not sure which one to go for, you can always go to the W3 Schools website and search HTML DOM style object. And it'll give you all the different properties that exist that relate to all the CSS properties that you can mess with. So you can see there's a giant list of those. And the one that I happen to be using in my example is background color. Not quite high enough. So this one right here. So it's just changing the background color property inside CSS, and you can do the exact same thing and with any other property that you want to mess with. And all I'm doing here is I'm sending in text to that. I'm basically, I'm actually pulling an index out of the array, because remember I had the arrays up there with all the different hex values. I could type the actual hex value right there instead of the array index, and it'd be the same thing. So all I'm doing is I'm storing the text in that property as if I was storing text in any other JavaScript property. So does that make sense? Okay. Do you guys have any questions? Because that's really all there is. That's it. It's really basic.
Object.
What's up?
I see a color object.
Yes, that's just, and like I said, I was using the word color object. So I'm pulling each of the divs out here, and I'm setting it inside a common variable called color object.
Oh,
So I don't have to type this 3 different times in here. I just type it once at the bottom, but I set color object once up there. There's a couple different ways you can do it. This way, just maybe
What does the document query selector do?
you've used get element by ID before, right? Query selector does the same sort of thing, but it allows you to select by ID, class, or element, just like you would with the CSS
And
selector.
you are using ID for that?
I'm using ID for that. So like, you know how when you're doing CSS selectors, you use the # for an ID or a dot for a class, that type of thing? Query selector allows you to do the same thing. You can use # for IDs, dot for classes, and then nothing for an entire element, whatever element you're using. So it's a,
So you just specifying which div by the color object and tell what style you are using for the div and then
yeah.
changing this background color specific to this.
Yeah, so whatever color it happens to be, it's going to be stored in the color object based on whatever string I pass in, because I've got a switch statement that's going through the different.
And you have 4 colors for each color?
I have 5. So index 0 through 4.
You are using number 3 for the random. Shouldn't it be 4?
Yeah. I wasn't realizing on this more often than I do. I can't call it a bug per se because everything's still working, but I would say that it's a programming error still. So I'd still call it a bug actually. So yeah.
Can you go back to your website and kind of just button and see it in action?
I'll do the change all. It's a little bit more apparent. So all it's doing is it's just changing the CSS style property for each one of those. Yeah, so again, I'll go back to my document. See how I have these arrays up here? I'm actually storing the hex value for the different colors in here. So yeah, it's pretty much all there is to it. I mean, it's pretty basic. I'm storing the colors inside there, and then it's just randomizing. So the change function just randomizes through it, picks a random index. So like Taku was saying, there's a number 3 here. That should be, yeah, that's wrong. So technically, actually, what I should be doing is I should be using, I should be doing ×5 minus 1 because it's a 0 indexed array. So I also wanted to be able to pick the 0 index out. So with the way I'm doing,
Can you simply do 4?
I could, but it starts with 1.
I thought random will return the number.
Well, actually, the way that I did the way I did it here, there's a couple different ways you can grab it. Actually, the way I did it here, it would grab from 0. So yes, I could have used 4, and that should work. So.
Oh, but you use 4.
Yeah, so that's just going to chop it off at the decimal pretty much.
So you have less chance to get the number 4 because it's between 0 and 1. Only time you get 4 is when it's the random is in tiny square. Because if you take 3.999999, it still is 3.
No, it should. I think 4 rounds up to 4 in that case.
Really?
I think so. I don't know. I have to look up the floor function again because I'm not sure exactly how that works. But I'm pretty sure it actually rounds up.
Yeah.
So I don't know what type of rounding it uses, but yeah, I didn't really. I'm not really super concerned with that because it's randomizing my number and doing what I'm serving my purpose. If I was dealing with a bank application and I needed to actually know what was going on down to the hundredths or thousandths decimal place, that'd be different. Yeah.
Where are you getting the red collection, green collection?
That's the arrays up here. So I have a red collection, green collection, blue collection. That's why I actually named the arrays. And then based on whatever string that I pass in as the argument to change, I'm setting in the same way I was doing color object, I'm doing the same thing with collection. So
you know, it's in one big object. So this is more like a method. You know,
the collection
change.
Change is a function itself. So yeah, it's not really, it's not a method because it's not really, I didn't build a class per se. So no, this is just a straight up function. It's technically inside of another function because this is the function I'm storing in the onload property, so that when the window loads, it's going to run everything inside here. So that just makes sure that if it waits.
Does it mean the array you created is a global array, or no?
Technically, no, because I am scoping it inside of a function that's being stored in onload. However, it is globally scoped within that function, if that makes sense. Yeah, so it's not completely and totally global, because if complete global would mean it's outside of every single function. Now, it does technically have a global scope compared to all of the other inner functions that would be inside that function. But yeah, technically no, it's technically a local scope inside the outer function and global scope compared to the inner functions. So yeah. So yeah, does everything in there make sense? I mean, really the only thing that needs to make sense is the style, background, color part. Everything else is just infrastructure to get it to work, so we can prove that out. But yeah, works with every other thing. So anything that you would type in text-wise inside your CSS document, you can type in there, same way. Just make sure that you're passing in a string. Even like there's certain times in your CSS document that you're typing, let's say 35 pixels, you don't have to stick quote marks around it. Here you do. Everything that you're passing in here is if it has a character like anything that's a letter, for example, you're going to store it inside quotes. If it's just a number for whatever property you're setting, just takes a number and no unit value, then you can just set it as an actual number. You don't have to stick inside of a string. However, if you always set it to a string, it should always work. So if you just always wrap something inside quotes, it should always work for you.
The name for CSS and the name here, for example, the background color is different, right? The CSS uses the hyphen.
Background dash color is all lowercase in CSS. There's no capital letters in any of the CSS properties.
So unless we don't have this feature for the specific thing that we change the background color, we don't really need to use CSS.
If you were, so what's the
really thing that we want to change the style, like background color or quick size or something. If it's here, that if you can do it with HTML or with JavaScript, then we don't really need to use CSS.
So what you're asking is, technically you could set everything inside JavaScript and would never have to use CSS, like actually make a CSS document? Yeah, you could. Not sure why you want to. It would make it's much more complicated to have to set everything up this way. It's more typing. If you're not going to do a whole lot of dynamic stuff, it makes more sense to create the CSS document itself, and then just change whatever dynamic elements that you want. However, you can make an entire website with just your JavaScript code. Basically, you don't have to type any HTML in because you know how to do all the you can append child, and you can actually add DOM objects and everything. And you can create style sheets and add the rules. So technically, you can make a website, a web page that has no HTML in it except for the basic HTML tags, head and body, and just stick your JavaScript script within the head, and you don't have to put anything else technically. I mean, you can build the style sheet and everything dynamically on the fly. That just takes more processing. So there's really, unless you're bored and you just want to do it as a proof of concept, there's really no reason to do that. So it's one of those things you want to use the tool that's designed for that thing first, and then manipulate it with something else if you need to. So the HTML language is designed for you to easily structure your page, so it's always best to do everything in that. Same thing with CSS, and then just use JavaScript to change anything that needs to be dynamic, anything that needs to, So just one of those, using the best tool for the job things. Can you hammer in a nail with a screwdriver? Yeah, but you might as well just use a hammer. So awesome. Well, anyway, if there's no more questions, then I'll let Taku roll over and do his thingy. Get this turned on.